talk about Jim Crowism and that African Americans had to create their own type of institutions and their own economy, and they became very autonomous in doing that. After creating all of that in the 50s and 60s, there was an attempt to say there's a need for a freeway to come in to basically improve the commercialization of Durham. That was devastating because African Americans basically worked, created those types of businesses. They had a clientele that supported them directly. By opening up that type of commercialization, you could go other places. And we find that African Americans did go other places.
Recognize just where we came from. Just where we came from and how hard it was to get in. We had a whole lot of times, a whole lot of obstacles thrown in our face. And every time I look at that Rick Hendricks Chevrolet place, I want to get a sticker down if I can blow it up. Just because it's there. They came through with that lie about urban renewal and took out all of our black entrepreneurs, our newspaper, our electrical shop, our 2 theaters, our health places.
My mother worked in Hayti for many years. She worked at the Regal Theater for many years.
Yeah.
And she was just a fixture in Hayti. All of the singers that came to town, gospel as well as secular singers, they all knew her. They all came to our house to eat.
Yeah.
She also worked at the donut shop for a few years. The donut shop was next door to the Regal Theater. She let almost every child in Durham who didn't have the 9 cents needed to get in, she let them in free. Everybody loved her. Everybody loved her. That's exactly right. But Hayti was truly a family. The people that worked there and had their businesses there took care of each other and loved each other.
All right.
And it was truly a loss. It was pitiful.
Some people thought that urban renewal was a way to actually renew the community, that the people who lived there could be the ultimate beneficiaries. When they used to call Durham the so-called black economic capital, and I think what they meant by that was that the per capita assets of Durham's black community were higher than in any city in the entire country. And that literally did not change. Urban renewal started in '62. They had completed the demolition, most of the demolition of the structures by '69, even though some did follow. And the Durham lost its position as #1 black economic community in the '70s to Chicago.
I can think of two explanations for why there was a perception that Hayti was in decline in the 1950s. Not just Hayti, but Durham. And both are rooted in perceptions as much as reality. The first is that Durham was adjusting to the decline of industry in general in the cities of North Carolina and the beginning of the decline of tobacco, so that there was a sense that Durham somehow had to find a future. And that vision would contribute eventually to the emergence of Research Triangle Park and a different plan for where Durham would go. But in the 1950s, there was a sense that property values were declining in Durham and that whites were starting to move out to the suburbs, and Durham was going to lose out. The central business core of Durham was in decline. And so the white business leaders of Durham looked out their windows and they saw a kind of landscape there of the big coal pile that was between the downtown and Hayti, and they saw the Hayti, and they saw this. If the downtown was going to be revived, they had to revive Hayti. Social statistics for Hayti weren't particularly bad at all. It was a comparatively Again, given the poverty of the community, it was a robust community. But for whites who wanted to remap the city, rebuild it, revitalize it, Hayti was a problem. So, two things that happened in the 50s were that there's growing sort of newspaper reporting about, in the white paper, what are we going to do about Durham? How do we save Durham? And at the same time, the federal government initiated the Interstate Highway Program. As part of that program, they decided they would fund highway construction, and you could bundle into highway construction, federally funded highway construction, urban renewal, because you had to connect the interstates up to the cities. And so Durham's town fathers saw a way to get access to federal funds to bring the interstate to Durham, and then use federal funds to fund an urban renewal project to address the problem of Hayti. So there was, this is a blessing as they saw it. They're going to get everything they needed funded almost entirely by the federal government. What wasn't funded by the federal government, they eventually did fund using a bond, a locally supported bond.
Each generation has a different technology that went with it. And an older generation often sometimes doesn't absorb that same technology because they didn't fundamentally need that technology to live. So you may have young people now who have iPhones and things of that nature, whereas an older generation may not need a cell phone or something like that. And that creates its own set of communication problems. If you're not coming to the dinner table where we all sat down, used to sit down at 6:30 and 7 p.m. and discuss our day, it's not happening because technology has gotten in the way of that.
Right now in America, we have this amazing opportunity to have a conversation with our young people about these are the implications of our history. These are the things that would not go away because of the shade of our skin. And we look at what it means to have an Obama. There are people who say, well, we no longer need to press these questions of race because America has proven we can elect a black president. And many people may feel that way. But when we look deeper, we discover that the response to an Obama is different than previous presidents. And that's notable because of the consequence of race and how people really respond to a person of color in leadership. We need to teach our young people what that means so that they will know how to engage with majority population. At the same time, when we talk about our history, it's being positioned different now because race doesn't mean what it used to mean, because we now have our brown brothers and sisters that we have to have conversation about what does it mean to be a community with Latino population in our midst. How do we feel about that? How is that connected to history? What are the stereotypes that we hold? What does it mean to have people in our community who bring forth a different culture altogether? So we're no longer just talking about race, be it black and white. We're talking about northern culture versus southern culture versus western culture versus Asian culture versus a variety of ways in which we think about life and economic development and religion and race and gender and homophobia or whatever it may be. We're in a different kind of place, and so the history serves a purpose, but it serves a different kind of purpose from what it used to.
What we do find in the X generation today is that many of them don't stand from which they've come. And it is our responsibility, like you're doing now, to make them understand that they're standing on the shoulders of Spaldings, of tobacco workers, of mill workers, and as a result, they have a responsibility to give back to the community, to develop the sense of racial pride, to understand that their future is being directed by individuals who understood what their role was, to give back to the community at any cost and support the community. That, to me, is really the essence of what Hayti is about.
I believe it is imperative for our spiritual, emotional, and intellectual growth that we take an honest look at our past and begin to assess our experiences, both good and bad, for our children, the next generation, we need to think about what legacy we will leave behind for them. Hayti, the heritage, the legacy of Black America, explores the rich African American experience in Durham, North Carolina. The Hayti community specifically during the city's first 100 years. We ask, how did a community filled with economic power and skill of innovation lose economic viability and social relevancy?